The LSD was hijacking my adrenaline and I felt powerful. You're an idiot. So delusionally, I'd say you're delusional right now. I searched for the rest of my tabs and took 6 more. Welcome to Psych Substance. In today's video, we're going to be visiting the Psych Substance subreddit where I've seen a post that somebody stated they had a 3,250 microgram LSD breakthrough experience. Now, for those of you who don't know, that is 32.5 averagely dosed LSD tabs. That is a monstrously disgusting dose that absolutely no one should attempt. So in these videos, what I essentially do is I read the story, I assess it for safety, I tell you what they did right, what they did wrong, what they could have done better, and I basically just judge their entire experience. So let's get right into this. So I have had an experience where I actually kind of broke through on LSD. I was in a bit of a bad place and wanted to escape reality. So I had a good amount of these blue 250 microgram gel tabs confirmed to be LSD and accurately dosed, and I decided to take 7 of them because, what's the worst that could happen? God, was I wrong. First thing I want to point out is a lot of the time when you have tabs above 100 micrograms, they're not accurately dosed, and there's no way to really know for sure unless you're the one who actually is laying the tabs yourself. Now, I'm notorious for coming up insanely fast. A paper tab usually takes 15 to 30 minutes for me to start to feel it, and gel tabs usually take effect in 10 to 15 minutes. Things are also going to hit you a lot faster when your brain is more saturated in the drug, i.e. when you take higher doses. And as soon as they started to hit, I could tell that this was going to be a wild ride. I got a stronger surge of the acid electricity than I thought was possible. I swear if you stuck a light bulb up my ass, I'd illuminate an entire football field. I kept getting very jerky movements, which for me is not a good thing because I'm on 2 different anticonvulsants for anxiety, gabapentin and Klonopin. For those of you who don't know, Klonopin is a benzodiazepine which can commonly be used as a trip killer, but if you're taking it every day and it's for your anxiety, then the trip killer effects are going to be pretty much nullified. So to be on the safe side, I took 800 milligrams of gabapentin to make sure at the very least I didn't have a grand mal seizure. Anyway, I started hitting my dab pen to try and jumpstart the trip a little, which ended up working. So essentially he's mixing cannabis with a massive amount of LSD, which is not advised because that is going to skyrocket some people's anxiety. As soon as you mix substances, you are raising your chance for adverse effects. So he's being really fucking stupid. I started to get all the typical visuals that LSD plus cannabis combo gives me, but quite a lot stronger, you don't say. But I overdid it a little and started to come up a little too hard for my own comfort, so I put down my dab pen, but it was already too late and I started to get this feeling of accelerating, almost like I was in a drag racing car, and then like I was on a spaceship entering warp drive. This feeling continued for the next few hours until something strange happened, T plus 2 hours and 30 minutes. The first peak. I kept having this experience of an almost falling asleep feeling until I would get a shock of electricity through my entire body and I would jolt awake. At this point, the visuals were so strong that I could barely tell what anything was. This will essentially happen. I've had this happen on actually 1/10 of this. On 300 micrograms, I've lost my sense of, perceivable reality to the point where eyes open or closed, I was completely enveloped in the illusion. You don't have to take a dose anywhere near this high to have those effects. You just have to be sensitive. I just closed my eyes and I became nothing and everything. I don't remember any of the visuals that I saw, which makes me pretty sad. But I remember a feeling of almost delusional childlike wonder at what was happening because with my eyes closed, I didn't really have senses, I just had knowledge. I don't know how to explain it. I don't remember being able to see or hear anything. I just remember being nothing and then being everything and then going back to being nothing again and just repeating. This sounds like a quote out of my video where I talked about someone I knew who did DMT for the first time, and when she came to, she explained it as she was nothing and then everything and then nothing. It's kind of a reliable effect of smoking 5-methoxy DMT. They call this being face-to-face with, I guess, God. They would classify that as a religious experience when you just become everything and nothing all at once. It is not surprising to me that you would have that on such a miraculously high dose of LSD, even though at that point... You guys, leave the kitchen!
Can I just ask, have there been studies that have said once you surpass this amount of micrograms, like the effects are like null and void?
You've reached the ceiling effect, like filling a cup full of water and then it just is overflowing, like it's already been filled?
Yeah, like you can't go any further.
Yeah, I think there's a ceiling effect that some people state does happen around 1 milligram. Come and say hi.
Hi. Hiya. Hi.
Okay. And the second question, who the hell spends like what, $320 for one trip?
Do you think they're lying?
I just had some questions because I hear you. Hear you filming, and I just don't understand any of this.
I'm filming a video where I read their story and then I give a reaction, and this is an absolutely stupid story.
sounds like a very egotistical person.
Sounds like a kid. Are you hungry?
Yeah.
Anyway, before we continue with this absolutely ridiculously stupid story, I gotta let you guys all know that this video is sponsored by Surfshark. If you enjoy my content, check them out. They are a VPN provider, and exclusively for members of Psych Substance or anyone who uses the code PSYCHED, you are going to get 3 extra months and 83% off, which unlocks the best price for a VPN on the market. For those of you who don't know, a VPN basically protects you from your internet provider seeing what you're doing. If you're watching these taboo videos or researching taboo stuff on Reddit about drugs, you're not secure unless you go use one of these VPNs, change your location, and then you are kept hidden. Another big bonus that I always talk about because I use it myself is you can go to services like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus. You can change your location, which unlocks a slew of new video content that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Anyway, if you support my channel and you don't have a VPN, I highly advise picking one up from Surfshark because the more of you guys who sign up, the more likely they are to sponsor future videos. So anyway, link to Surfshark below, and let's get back to the regular scheduled programming. I just remember being nothing and then being everything and then going back to being nothing again and just repeating. But the entire time I was just observing as I, not my physical body, but my mind was filled with knowledge that I couldn't even fathom understanding. I had no thoughts or even any memories of it happening. I just have a feeling. Like I know that it happened, and every time I recall the event, I get this feeling of wanting to remember and go back, but I can't remember. It feels like it's forbidden, locked up in a vault deep in my mind, only to be released when the time is right. That right time being when your brain is back in the configuration of a psychedelic trip. I've talked about this before. You can't really remember your trips because your brain was actually in a very different chemical makeup than it is in your natural state. And you can remember thoughts, like you can remember events, but you can't remember a physical configuration that was altered. That's why when you trip again, you're like, oh, now I remember. It has this effect where it's like when you're back in it, it feels like no time has elapsed. You get this tripping deja vu where you go from one trip basically right into the next one. It's a really interesting effect. I opened my eyes again to what must have been some hours later because it was starting to get light out. So he just blacked out for a while, which is completely normal on a monstrous dose that high. With my heart racing and ego completely obliterated, just feeling pure confusion and terror and whatever the F in fresh hell I had just experienced. I couldn't formulate thoughts at this point. I was simply forced into using conceptual thinking. I couldn't form words in my brain, only feelings. I felt like I was an animal. My tongue felt alien in my own mouth, and it felt like I was invincible. That's weird. I was able to use my full muscle capacity. I tore my bicep lifting something up I'd never be able to lift normally just because I could. It sounds like bullspit, to be honest. I mean, this sounds like those old PCP propaganda stories from like the 80s where they would say you could punch through car windshields on PCP and feel no pain. Like if he actually tore his bicep, his arm would be in a sling. I see your yogurt. That's a beautiful looking yogurt. His arm would be in a sling, and like people with torn biceps, it actually like it snaps back. It is a serious injury that affects you for the rest of your life. So I seriously doubt that he tore his bicep. Maybe he strained his bicep. This guy is just like exaggerating shit, man, and making it sound ridiculous. Like, oh, he had super strength because he was on acid. Pfft, give me a fucking break. The LSD was hijacking my adrenaline, and I felt powerful. You're an idiot. So delusionally, I'd say you're delusional right now. I searched for the rest of my tabs and took 6 more. So this idiot was already on a massive dose, and then he takes 6 more. How is that necessary? What could he have done better? Let's point that out already. He could have just not taken acid because someone with this mentality shouldn't be tripping, period. This just made the trip last way longer, and I had stronger visuals for much longer. This was obviously dumb in hindsight, but I was tripping balls with nobody to stop me. I know, also very dumb. My intention here was to go back to that place in the peak because I wanted to know more. This guy's an idiot. So now he's got T plus 6 hours in the second peak. So once again, I just lie in my bed looking out my window at the trees as the branches split off into new branches, and those new branches kept splitting into new branches. It sounds like he's just explaining that Doctor Strange movie when he puts his hand out and his fingertips become hands, and then those hands become hands, and you know, it's all branching out of his fingers like a bunch of hands. I don't know if these were his actual effects or if this is just one big shit post and it's actually made its way into a video, which would be hilarious, but this is a good example of how stupid people are, including me, apparently. I was starting to get a little bored. He was starting to get a little bored at waiting for the tabs to hit. I just took over 1,000 micrograms of acid and, oh man, this is so boring, just waiting to see what could happen. I'm bored. Let's take more. I didn't know what else to do, so I just started hitting my dab pen like I No, you hit your dab pen like an idiot. Wood on the come down. This guy is, if this story is real, the person who wrote it is a complete moron. This is a recipe for psychosis. People have actually gone to the hospital and had psychotic breaks with far less milligrams than this. I mean, sometimes even just one tab of acid can cause somebody who has latent, schizophrenia or some kind of mental disorder that hasn't come to the surface yet to be revealed. I'm not saying that psychedelics can cause schizophrenia, but if you already have a condition, it can exacerbate it or sometimes reveal itself. And even if you don't have a condition, a dose this high would likely cause a psychotic episode, like drug-induced psychosis for sure. I've had drug-induced psychosis on a fraction of this amount. So all in all, this is a stupid story, and I kind of just want to stop reading it. So this was a big mistake. No shit. My heart started to race immediately as soon as it hit, and instinctively I went to check for my pulse, and it felt like my pulse and my entire body was multiplying and splitting apart. All of me was taking up 3 places in space at once. So every time I went to try and check my pulse, I literally felt my hand go through my neck before I felt it touch my neck. And I could feel 3 different heartbeats from checking the pulse in my neck, and in my chest I felt the same, like I had 3 hearts. This very much prevented me from being able to tell how fast my heart was beating, and this, of course, freaked me the F out, and I started to panic real quick. I don't understand why he's panicking. If he had 3 hearts, then if one goes, he's got 2 left to take up the slack. Like, geez, come on, man, logic. Before this trip, it was almost impossible to make me panic on a psych. I don't know how. I just got a strong ego, I guess. But not for much longer after this trip. This trip humbled me and put me in my place. I doubt it. This panicking over not being able to check my heart rate sent me into a spiral, leading me to the hospital. In brackets, I was driven there and walked to and from the car. He's not pointing out who drove him, but did he get a cab? Like, on that high of a dose, how did he have the capacity, say, to call an Uber to get to the hospital? He was somehow driven to the hospital, but there's no information about that process. Like, I imagine if you're tripping that hard alone, you got to get someone to come over to drive you, and how would you even communicate to that person? That is critical information. That's crucial, and it's not included for reasons that make no sense. Because I kept having heart palpitations from stress. This only happens with insane amounts of stress. I'm an otherwise healthy individual. As soon as I was at the hospital and was under medical supervision, I immediately calmed down and the stress was relieved. They gave me IV fluids because I was dehydrated and told me that I was all fine. This assurance from a doctor calmed me enough that I was back in a good trip state of mind and was able to ride out the come down fairly easily from that point. But during the peak, I really thought that I was going to die as I was falling asleep. Okay. After this trip, my pupils stayed slightly more dilated than normal, making my eyes sensitive to light for a couple of weeks, and weed was extremely psychedelic for the next week, almost giving me 100 to 150 microgram-like effects from just half a gram joint. This slowly wore off to weed being just slightly psychedelic for me again over the next month. Since then, I've only had 2 more LSD trips and now prefer the more calm and less erratic psilocybin mushrooms. Psilocybin mushrooms are not more calm and less erratic. It depends on the person. They can be more. This guy's an idiot. To trip on because the stimulation, the electric feeling from acid makes me very tense and brings back memories of that nightmare trip. Especially the trees, man. I stared out my window at the same trees empty-minded for at least 4 to 5 hours as they just transformed in front of my eyes. Whenever I look at them now, even sober, I still get reminded of everything that happened that night. So the first thing I want to point out about this entire story is it's very unlikely that his dose was that high. Very, very unlikely. Again, a lot of tabs are claim to be a higher dose than they actually are. Are we even going to look at the comments? Top comment is, I find it hard to believe that you managed to coherently do anything at 3,250 micrograms, let alone go to a hospital. If that's true, this trip would put 90% of people into a drug-induced psychosis. It's exactly what I said. He says, I was brought to a hospital. I barely managed to call here we go. He says, I barely managed to call a family member and had them rush me to the house. Probably should have clarified that. Yeah, I think he should have clarified that. But the fact that he could even use a phone and dial is really evidence that this is not indicative of a trip at that high of a dose. If it actually is, then this is a indication that this person has a uniquely high tolerance. A dose that high is going to cause a trip to last beyond the usual 8 to 12 hours. It could last a couple days, maybe more. If you have the drug-induced psychosis, you could be in the hospital for weeks, months. Who really knows how long something that reckless is going to damage you for? But it's unlikely that he'd be able to operate a phone. Like you would have no connection to your eyeballs. You probably wouldn't even see the phone. It would be morphing and transforming into something completely otherworldly. That entire story is a great example of somebody, if assuming it's true, it is extreme recklessness in its worst form. I mean, he says the tabs were tested, but do we really know for sure? Do we know if that was real LSD? Do we know the dose? There's so many unknowns here. And overall, it is a great example of someone who's a complete moron who should not be taking psychedelics. So if this is you and you are watching this video, congratulations. You have been featured on YouTube and you get the stamp from me of the one of, maybe not the dumbest. I mean, there was that girl who boofed all those mushrooms. That was pretty dumb. Yeah, this is really dumb too. This is probably around the same. So like you guys, both of you guys are complete idiots as far as I'm concerned. And that is not a good example of what safe tripping looks like. Safe tripping, first of all, would have a trip sitter. Beyond the dose, like we all understand the dose was stupid, but the next big mistake is you need someone with you, especially if you're dosing high, to make sure that things all go smoothly. In some instances, to make sure you don't hurt yourself accidentally or intentionally. Some scary shit has happened on high doses when you feel like you're in a dream and the only way to wake up is to die. So that was a massive mistake. The mindset that this guy had is also really stupid. It sounded like he just wanted to feel as high as possible. Like your intent creates the trip, and his intent was just to see how blasted he could get because he said he has this big ego and psychedelics are easy for him. And that is a ticking time bomb. Eventually, people like that, I've seen it happen where they think psychedelics don't cause, the same types of insanely intense experiences in them as they do in others. I've seen those people crack, and it can be devastating. Like I said, it can cause a psychotic episode. All in all, that was a horrible story. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and I want to give a big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring these videos. And yeah, head on over to r/psychsubstance if you have a story. Next time I do one of these, I'd like to contrast it with a story of someone doing things right. We've had enough stories of people doing things ridiculously stupid and wrong. Let's find someone doing something right for a change. So I like to pick the stories that have the most upvotes. So it's on you guys on the subreddit. Upvote stories that are good examples of trips, okay? Anyway, see you guys.